stepping up and making the decision to stay in that marriage, even though there wasn't a marriage in the last 10 years. That was my first step, my first adult decision that I had made to do that.
Yeah.
And so I started to do a lot of work on my little me.
Yes.
Because up to that point, my little person inside of me was still spoiled, was still abused, and was still controlling my actions and my behaviors and my insecurities.
Yeah.
And as I got to the end of that 10 years, my second son became an adult, and my promise to him was to stay in the house until he became an adult and he could understand why I was leaving.
Yeah.
And I basically left shortly after he turned 18 years of age.
Yeah.
And made the transition and took full responsibility of my little me.
Yes.
And gave him the opportunity to stop controlling me. And I made it clear to him that that I would take it from here, that I would protect him, and that no one else would hurt him any further.
Mm-hmm.
And not until I took the responsibility as an adult was I able to make a transition. Yeah. And that was my turning point. That's when I became a man at 50.
Yeah.
To go back to the book title.
Yes. Go back to the book title.
Mm-hmm.
So it took you a long time to really start to work on yourself and make those adult decisions. And when you talk about little me, it's in reference to your inner child, and the fact that you hadn't grown up in all that time, and you still hadn't acted with adult decision making. You were still virtually playing the child for all that time. Is that how you felt, Brad?
Right. I was a follower.
Yes.
I made no financial decisions. I worked very hard. At times I had multiple jobs, sometimes morning and night.
Yeah.
I worked very hard and provided an income, but I wasn't involved in discipline. I wasn't involved in any parenting decisions whatsoever.
Yeah.
And because I didn't know how. I lived with a child, little Brad. I lived with a child 24/7.
Yeah.
And for a very long time, for 50 years or so,
yeah.
I couldn't even control his behavior. So I wasn't in a position to be a parent.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or a husband for that.
Yeah.
For that.
Yeah. So skipping forward to present time, where are you at now, Brad?
Well, it's interesting. When I made the transition and turned 50, that's the same time that I left my failing marriage, my second marriage.
Yes.
At 50 years old.
Yeah.
And I also, like I said, I released him and I took care of him, and I made a decision that it was time for me to step up and control what direction I wanted to go into. And leaving my failing marriage, my second marriage, that was very empowering. That was an adult decision. It was like my second or third adult decision I had made in 50 years.
Yeah.
And I met my third wife, my current wife, my last wife.
Yes.
And she was younger than me.
Yeah.
And she allowed me to step into the role of provider, husband, father, and strength. The strength that she needed, the strength that would empower her and give her the security that she was seeking. And so it was an opportunity for me to step into the role that it was past time. It was past due. It was time for me to step into that role.
Yeah.
So I made that transition. And the first 50 years of my life, and I'm sure other people can relate to this, had no credit, had no money, and basically had no success and nothing to show for it.
Yeah.
We've been together for 5 years, and we have accomplished quite a few things together, moving in the right direction. We feel normal. We have a house and cars and investments and stuff that everybody normal has.
Yes.
And so it was a new life, a new beginning at 50.
At 50.
And the reason why I wrote the book, and it's important for the listeners to understand that I wrote it for two reasons. I wrote it in hopes that it helps at least one other person that may be struggling with something in their life or something in their past. And I want them to be able to see that I survived. I didn't end up in prison, or I didn't end up in rehab, or I didn't end up worse. I never even thought about the thought of taking my life, never ever occurred to me. So just to give other people hope that they can make it, and there are possibilities ahead of all of us. And that's the one reason. The second reason I wrote the book is my father, and I'll touch base on that just real briefly. I wrote it for my father because when my father died, there was a situation where he had fallen and he had bleeding in his brain. And he also had part of his, half of his heart was obstructed. He had a blockage in his heart. And my family made a very difficult decision to let him pass, to let him go, because the doctors couldn't address either one of those issues because of various reasons. But when he passed away, I actually wasn't there when he passed away, but I was there in the IC unit. When we made the decision to pull everything. And he had a lot of guilt, and he had a lot of fear and anxiety, and he spent the last 5 years of his life crying and praying and walking up and down the halls of the nursing home, and that was his life in the last 5 years. After the doctors took everything, and unplugged everything and took everything off of him, he was in a hospice, and the doctors gave him about a day or two. He lived for 10 days on morphine and ice chips and refused to leave because he was fearful and he was scared, and he didn't want to take all that with him. But subsequently, he ended up taking all of that negative pain with him. And that's the second reason why I wrote the book. I have no intention of taking any of this with me. I'm leaving it behind to hopefully benefit someone else.
Listen, Brad, Evie wants to know, do you have any kind of relationship with your family, or have you washed your hands with them?
It's kind of ironic.
It's a great question, Evie.
Yes, it's a great question. I have reconnected with all of my family members, including the two siblings that interfered in my life dramatically. And recently, in the past couple of months, I attended a family reunion. And everything went just fine. But I went to that reunion as an adult. I didn't go to the reunion as the baby of the family. I went back as an adult, and I have made peace with all of them, and I am in communication with all of them, some more than others. But all 9 brothers and sisters are still alive. We're all of us are still alive, but both my mother and father have passed on.
Now passed, David wants to know, people tend to try and find religion when they hold on to regret of life. Any thoughts on that, Brad?
As far as my father goes, he was a devout Catholic.